The fluorescent lights of Sterling Global Finance hummed their eternal song as Nina Castellano stepped out of the service elevator on the 45th floor. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a staccato rhythm that matched her clicking heels on the marble floor. 23 years old, fresh from State University with more student debt than savings, and she was here, actually here, in one of the most prestigious financial firms in the country. She smoothed down her charcoal blazer, purchased from a discount store but pressed with such care that it almost looked expensive. Almost. The receptionist, a woman with ice-blonde hair and a smile that never reached her eyes, barely glanced up from her computer. "Nina Castellano, junior analyst," Nina said, trying to keep her voice steady. "15th cubicle on the right. Your supervisor is Mr. Patterson. Don't be late to the morning briefing." Nina nodded and made her way through a maze of glass partitions and designer furniture. The view from the windows was breathtaking, the entire city spread below like a circuit board of ambition and dreams. She found her cubicle smaller than her childhood bedroom and set down her second-hand briefcase. What the receptionist didn't know, what none of these polished professionals knew, was that Nina had been in this building 100 times before. At midnight, with her mother, Rosa, who'd cleaned these floors for 15 years, emptying trash bins and scrubbing toilets while the executives slept in their comfortable homes. The morning briefing was a blur of financial jargon and projected earnings. Nina absorbed it all, taking notes in shorthand she'd taught herself. But it was at 10:30 during her coffee break that everything changed. She was walking past the executive conference room when she heard the voice, deep, authoritative, brooking no argument. The door stood slightly ajar. "We need to cut operational costs by 20% this quarter. I want a list of redundancies by Friday." Nina's feet stopped moving. She knew that voice from the business magazines, from the news. Marcus Thorne, CEO, 36 years old, known as the Ice King of Finance for his ruthless efficiency. "Mr. Thorne, that would mean laying off nearly 80 service workers," another voice protested weakly. "Then we lay off 80 service workers. They're replaceable. Find cheaper contractors." Nina's blood turned to ice, then immediately to fire. 80 people, 80 families. People like her mother, who worked double shifts to put her through college, whose hands were rough from chemicals, and whose back ached from years of bending and lifting. Before rational thought could stop her, Nina pushed the door open fully. 12 faces turned toward her in shock. But she saw only one, Marcus Thorne, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows like a king surveying his kingdom. He was tall, imposing in a midnight blue suit that probably cost more than her entire year's salary. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from granite, and eyes so intensely gray they seemed to see straight through her. "Who are you?" His voice was dangerous, quiet. "Nina Castellano, junior analyst." She stepped forward, her folder clutched against her chest like a shield. "And I'm here to tell you you're making a catastrophic mistake." The silence was absolute. Someone gasped. Nina saw her supervisor, Mr. Patterson, appear in the doorway, his face draining of color. Marcus took 2 deliberate steps toward her. "Explain, now!" Nina's hands trembled, but she forced her voice to remain steady. "You want to cut 80 service positions to save operational costs, but you haven't calculated the real price. Contractor services mean constant turnover. You'll spend 6 months training new people who'll leave for better wages. Quality drops. Security risks increase because temporary workers have no loyalty. And the institutional knowledge you lose? Priceless." She took a breath, gaining momentum. "These 80 people know this building better than your executives know their own homes. They know which systems fail, which areas need attention, which routines keep everything running smoothly. Replace them with rotating contractors and you'll hemorrhage money and inefficiencies within 6 months. Marcus's eyes narrowed, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Plus," Nina continued, her voice strengthening, "you'll destroy 80 families for what amounts to a rounding error in Sterling's annual revenue. Maybe from up here, Mr. Thorne, people look like numbers on a spreadsheet. But down there in the real world, they're human beings with rent to pay and children to feed." The gray eyes held hers for a long, electric moment. "What's your full name?" Nina Castellano. How long have you worked here, Miss Castellano? 3 hours. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps even admiration. Everyone out. Except you, Miss Castellano. The room emptied in seconds. Mr. Patterson shot her a look that promised her career was over before it began. Then the door clicked shut, leaving Nina alone with the most powerful man she'd ever met. Marcus circled her slowly, and Nina forced herself not to shrink back. When he stopped, he was close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and cedar-scented. "Do you understand what you just did?" he asked quietly. "Yes, I just ended my career on my first day." "Not necessarily." He tilted his head, studying her face. "You presented a logical argument with passion and precision. You challenged me in front of my entire executive team. That takes either incredible courage or incredible stupidity." "Maybe both," Nina whispered. His lips quirked. Not quite a smile, but close. "Why did you do it? Risk everything for 80 people you don't even know?" The answer came from somewhere deep and honest. "Because I know what it's like. My mother is one of those service workers you were about to make redundant. I know what it means to work until your body screams for wages that barely cover rent. I know the fear of layoffs, the panic when work disappears." She met his eyes directly. "Those 80 people aren't numbers, Mr. Thorne. They're real. And they matter." Something shifted in his expression, the corporate mask slipping to reveal something raw underneath. He was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right. About all of it." Nina blinked, certain she'd heard wrong. "I won't proceed with the layoffs," Marcus continued. "We'll revise the proposal." He moved to his desk, pulled out a business card, and pressed it into her hand. "But now I have a problem. A junior analyst with 3 hours of experience who has the intelligence to present sound arguments and the courage to confront me in front of my board. I can't just leave you filing reports." His fingers lingered on hers for a moment. "Starting tomorrow, you work directly with me. I'm developing a new division focused on sustainable growth and corporate responsibility. I need someone who understands people, not just profit margins." Nina stared at the card. "Marcus Thorne, CEO, Sterling Global Finance. And Ms. Castellano?" His voice dropped lower. "Next time you want to storm into my boardroom, knock first." This time he did smile, transforming his entire face. "But don't stop doing it." Nina arrived at 7:45 the next morning, nerves singing beneath her skin. She wore a different blazer, deep burgundy, borrowed from her college roommate, and carried the business card Marcus had given her like a talisman. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt surreal, as if she'd stepped through a portal into someone else's life. Marcus's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Helen with silver hair and an expression that could freeze water, looked up as Nina approached. "Ms. Castellano, Mr. Thorne is expecting you." Her tone was neutral, carefully blank. "Conference room 3. He's reviewing the sustainability proposals." Nina found him standing at a glass table covered in documents, his jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. The morning light caught the sharp angles of his face, and for a moment she forgot how to breathe. He looked up, and something flickered in those gray eyes. "Punctual, good," he gestured to the papers. "These are preliminary proposals for the new division. I want your honest opinion. No corporate speak, no trying to tell me what you think I want to hear." For the next 3 hours they worked. Marcus challenged every idea she presented. Nina pushed back with data and logic. She discovered he was brilliant, sharp and strategic, but also surprisingly willing to listen. When she suggested worker representation on decision-making committees, he didn't dismiss it. He asked questions, pushed for details, made her defend her position until it was bulletproof. "You're relentless," she said during a brief break. "Accepting the coffee he'd ordered, so are you." His eyes held hers a moment too long. "It's refreshing." The days that followed blurred together. Early mornings and late nights, working sessions that stretched past midnight. Nina saw sides of Marcus that the business world never witnessed. The way he rubbed his temples when exhausted. His dry humor that caught her off guard. The passion beneath the cold exterior when discussing projects that actually mattered. And she felt it, that dangerous pull between them. The electricity when their hands brushed reaching for the same document. The way his voice softened when he spoke her name. the weight of his gaze when he thought she wasn't looking. But she also saw the whispers, noticed the stares from other analysts, felt the judgment radiating from senior staff who'd been with the company for decades and couldn't understand why a newcomer had Marcus's ear. It was Beverly Grant, chief financial officer, who confronted her first. Nina was getting coffee when Beverly appeared beside her, immaculate in pearl gray silk. "A word of advice, Ms. Castellano." Her smile was sharp as a scalpel. "Whatever you think is happening between you and Marcus, remember, men like him don't choose women like you. They use them, then move on to someone appropriate." Nina's hand tightened on her mug. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Of course you do. You're young and pretty, and you said the right things at the right time. But this fantasy you're living, it has an expiration date." The words stung more than they should have, because part of Nina feared they were true. That evening, working late in Marcus's office, the tension finally snapped. They were standing at the window reviewing skyline projections for a new community development project when Marcus's hand settled on her lower back, gentle but deliberate. Nina's breath caught. She turned, finding him closer than expected, close enough to see gold flecks in his gray eyes. "This is a terrible idea," she whispered. "Probably the worst I've ever had." But he didn't move away. His thumb traced a slow circle on her spine, sending shivers through her entire body. Marcus. He kissed her before she could finish, and the world dissolved. His lips were firm and demanding, tasting of coffee and something uniquely him. Nina's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, drowning in sensations she'd never allowed herself to feel. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, reality came crashing back. "We can't," Nina said, even as her body screamed the opposite. "I work for you. There are rules, power dynamics." "I know." His forehead rested against hers. "I know all the reasons why this is wrong. But Nina, I haven't felt this alive in years. You make me remember why I started this company, not for profit, but to build something meaningful." They tried to resist. They truly did. But the pull was magnetic, inevitable. Stolen kisses in his office after everyone left. His hand finding hers under the conference table during meetings. Late nights that turned into early mornings, working and talking and discovering they fit together in ways that defied logic. For 3 weeks, they existed in a bubble, careful and secret. Until the bubble burst. Nina was in the executive washroom when she heard voices. Beverly Grant and Richard Westfield, senior vice president, washing their hands at the adjacent sinks. "It's worse than we thought," Richard said. "He's completely infatuated." Gave her lead on the sustainability division. "She's been here 6 weeks. The girl's playing him perfectly," Beverly replied. "I have to admire the strategy, target the one weakness in his armor, the savior complex about working-class heroes." Nina's stomach turned to ice. "The board is concerned," Richard continued. "Marcus Thorne, heir to Sterling's legacy, involved with a junior analyst whose mother cleans our offices. The optics are disastrous." "Catherine Thorne called me yesterday," Beverly said, and Nina could hear the smile in her voice. "She's arranging dinners with Adriana Sinclair. Old money Vassar-educated, sits on 3 non-profit boards. That's who Marcus should be with. Someone needs to make him see reason before this girl ruins his reputation." Nina waited until they left, then stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her face was pale, eyes too bright. The words echoed in her mind, "Playing him perfectly, savior complex, ruins his reputation." That afternoon, there was an emergency board meeting. Nina wasn't invited, but the raised voices carried through the closed doors. She heard Marcus's name, heard her own, heard words like inappropriate, liability, and scandal. When Marcus emerged 2 hours later, his face was a mask of stone. He walked past her without a word, into his office, closing the door firmly behind him. Nina waited 5 minutes, then 10. Finally, she knocked. "Come in." He stood at the window, hands in his pockets, shoulders rigid. The setting sun painted everything orange and gold, but the light felt cold. "They want you gone," he said without turning. "The board. They're threatening votes of no confidence, shareholder lawsuits. They say you're a distraction, that our relationship compromises the company's integrity." Nina's heart cracked, but she kept her voice steady. "What do you want?" I want... He finally turned, and the anguish in his eyes nearly broke her. I want to not have to choose between you and everything I've built. But that's not an option they're giving me. So you've made your choice. Nina, no. She held up a hand, tears burning behind her eyes but refusing to fall. I understand. You have responsibilities, a legacy, thousands of employees depending on you. I'm just one person. The math is simple. It's not about math. He crossed to her in 3 strides, hands cupping her face. It's about protecting you. If we continue, they'll destroy you. Every achievement questioned, every promotion attributed to our relationship. Your career will be dead before it starts. That should be my choice, not yours. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for me. Nina pulled away from his hands, from the warmth that made everything worse. You're not protecting me, Marcus. You're protecting yourself from feeling guilty. There's a difference. She walked to the door, each step in agony. Nina, wait. You know what the saddest part is? She turned, and now the tears did fall. These past weeks, I saw who you really are underneath the CEO armor. I saw the man who cares about making real change. The man who laughs at terrible jokes and works past midnight because he actually believes in the projects. And I fell in love with that man. Her voice broke. But this man here, the one who gives up when things get hard, who lets other people decide what his heart is worth, I don't know him. And I don't want to. She left, closing the door softly, while Marcus stood frozen in his empire of glass and steel, finally understanding the cost of his carefully built walls. Nina didn't go home. She couldn't face her mother's questions or the tiny apartment where every corner reminded her of dreams that had seemed possible just hours ago. Instead, she walked until her feet ached, until the corporate towers gave way to familiar streets lined with corner stores and chain-link fences. She found herself at the Riverside Community Center, a converted warehouse where she'd volunteered since high school. The basketball court echoed with the sounds of kids playing pickup games. The smell of industrial cleaner and hope filled the air, so different from Sterling's sterile perfection, but infinitely more real. Nina? Carmen Rodriguez, the center's director, emerged from her office. Shouldn't you be at your fancy job? Not anymore. Nina's voice cracked, and suddenly she was crying, really crying, while Carmen held her and asked no questions. She spent the next 3 days in a haze, sent a formal resignation email to Sterling, ignored 17 calls from Marcus, helped at the community center, throwing herself into tutoring kids and organizing donation drives, anything to avoid thinking about gray eyes and the ghost of lips on hers. Her mother, Rosa, came home from her night shift on the 4th morning to find Nina making breakfast, eyes red-rimmed and hollow. Mija, what happened? And Nina told her everything. The confrontation, the promotion, falling in love with a man whose world would never accept her. Rosa listened, her work-worn hands wrapped around her coffee mug, and when Nina finished, she spoke with the quiet wisdom that came from a lifetime of struggle. You know what I learned cleaning those offices for 15 years? Rich people's hearts break the same as ours. Money doesn't protect you from being stupid or scared. She squeezed Nina's hand. The question is, does he love you enough to be brave? Nina didn't have an answer. Marcus, meanwhile, was living his own version of hell. He sat through the board meeting where they congratulated him on handling the situation, attended a dinner with his mother Catherine and Adriana Sinclair, who was beautiful and accomplished and left him feeling absolutely nothing. Adriana spoke about charity galas and her family's vineyard in Napa. Catherine beamed with approval. And Marcus felt like he was suffocating in a life that looked perfect from the outside but was hollow at its core. You seem distracted, Adriana said gently, touching his arm. Everything all right? I'm in love with someone else, Marcus heard himself say. The table went silent. His mother's smile froze. Adriana withdrew her hand gracefully, unsurprised. The analyst, she said. It wasn't a question. Her name is Nina, and I made the worst mistake of my life letting her go. He stood abruptly, throwing his napkin on the table. I'm sorry, Adriana. You deserve someone who can love you the way you should be loved. That's not me. Marcus Anthony Thorne, sit down this instant, Catherine commanded, but he was already leaving. his heart pounding with a clarity he hadn't felt in days. He'd spent his entire life doing what was expected, building the empire, maintaining the legacy, choosing safety over risk. And for what? To end up alone in a penthouse that felt like a beautiful prison? He drove to Nina's address, a modest building in a neighborhood his GPS seemed surprised to navigate. Climbed 4 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken. Knocked on apartment 12B, a teenage girl answered. Nina's younger sister Bianca, 16, with Nina's eyes but harder, more guarded. "She doesn't want to see you," Bianca said flatly. "Please, I need to talk to her." "You had your chance to talk. You chose your board of directors over my sister." Bianca started to close the door. She cried for 3 days. Didn't eat, barely slept. My mom was worried sick. Each word was a knife to his chest. "I know, and I was wrong. I was a coward, and I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix it. You're right." Marcus met her fierce gaze. "But I'm here to try anyway. I'm here to choose her publicly and permanently, no matter what it costs." Bianca studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "She's at the Riverside Community Center. 3 blocks west," she pointed. "But mister, if you're going there, be sure, because my sister deserves someone who won't run when things get hard." "I'm sure," Marcus said quietly. "I've never been more sure of anything." He found Nina in the community center's main hall, helping kids set up chairs for an event. She wore jeans and an old college sweatshirt, hair pulled back in a ponytail, and she was more beautiful than she'd ever been in Sterling's corporate halls. She looked up and froze, a chair suspended in her hands. "What are you doing here, Marcus?" He walked toward her slowly, aware of a dozen curious eyes watching, being incredibly selfish. "Coming to ask you to forgive me and give me another chance, even though I don't deserve it." Nina set down the chair carefully. "This is where I volunteer, where I come to remember what matters." "You don't belong here." "I don't belong anywhere without you." He stopped a few feet away, giving her space. "I spent 4 days doing exactly what everyone expected, cutting you out, moving on, having dinner with the woman my mother chose. And you know what I realized?" She said nothing, but her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I realized that I've spent my entire life building this empire, becoming someone my father would be proud of, maintaining a legacy. But none of it means anything if I'm hollow inside." He took a breath. "You asked me once what I wanted. I want you, Nina. I want to wake up next to someone who challenges me, who reminds me why wealth matters, not for accumulation, but for the good it can do. I want to build something that matters with someone who sees the world clearly. Marcus, I know I hurt you. I know I chose wrong, but I'm here now, publicly, in front of all these witnesses, telling you that I love you. Not despite where you come from, but because everything you've overcome made you into someone extraordinary." A tear slid down Nina's cheek. "What about the board? Your mother? The scandal? Let them be scandalized." He closed the distance between them, hands gentle on her shoulders. "I called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. I'm going to announce our relationship, and if they don't like it, they can find a new CEO, because I finally understand power without love is just emptiness. You'd give up Sterling for me?" "In a heartbeat. But I'm hoping I won't have to. I'm hoping I can have both, the company that does good in the world and the woman who taught me what good actually means." He cupped her face, thumb brushing away her tears. "But if I must choose, I choose you. Every single time." Nina searched his eyes, looking for doubt, for hesitation. "Found only love and determination. You're sure?" she whispered. "Because I can't go through losing you again." "I've never been more sure of anything." He kissed her then, soft and reverent, a promise sealed with lips and breath and hope. Around them, the community center erupted in cheers and applause. Carmen was crying. The basketball game had stopped, teenagers whistling and laughing, and Nina kissed him back, pouring 4 days of heartbreak and years of loneliness into one perfect moment of connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and smiling, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. "What happens now?" Nina asked. "Now we face it together, whatever comes." The board meeting the next morning was legendary in Sterling's history. Marcus stood at the head of the conference table, Nina beside him, and made his announcement with absolute clarity. Nina Castellano and I are in a relationship. We tried to keep it private to avoid exactly this situation, but I'm done hiding. She's brilliant, ethical, and has taught me more about real leadership in 2 months than I learned in 15 years of running this company. Beverly Grant's face was stony. Richard Westfield looked apoplectic, but Helen, Marcus's assistant, was smiling. And Thomas Park, the youngest board member, actually started clapping. If anyone has a problem with my personal life interfering with my professional judgment, I understand, Marcus continued. But I should note that since Nina joined Sterling, we've developed 3 programs that have already improved worker retention by 18% and community relations by 32%. Her perspective isn't a liability, it's an asset. This is highly irregular, Beverly began. So is genius, Thomas interrupted. I've reviewed Miss Castellano's work. It's exceptional. If we lose Marcus over this, we're fools. The vote was closer than Marcus hoped, 8-5 in his favor. Beverly and Richard resigned on the spot. But Marcus had his board support, conditional though it was. The media coverage was brutal. Society pages buzzed with speculation. Nina faced harassment on social media, cruel comments about gold digging and ambition. Some Sterling employees gave her cold shoulders. Others, particularly younger staff and those in lower positions, looked at her with hope, proof that the corporate ladder wasn't reserved exclusively for the privileged. Marcus was relentless in his support. When a business magazine ran a hit piece questioning Nina's qualifications, he wrote a detailed rebuttal with data on her contributions. When a society matron made a snide comment at a fundraiser, he publicly disinvited her from future Sterling events. And slowly, grudgingly, the world began to accept them. 6 months later, Marcus implemented the worker dignity initiative Nina had designed. Fair wages, profit-sharing, educational opportunities for service staff. Rosa Castellano was promoted to facilities director, overseeing 300 employees. She cried when Marcus personally delivered the news. 1 year after their first meeting, Marcus took Nina back to the Riverside Community Center. They'd just announced the Sterling Riverside Partnership, $10 million over 5 years for youth programs, job training, and community development. After the ceremony, after the speeches and photographs, Marcus led Nina to the basketball court where he'd found her that desperate day. "You know what I realized?" he said, pulling her close. "That day I came here looking for you, I wasn't just finding you. I was finding myself, the person I was supposed to be all along." "That's beautiful," Nina smiled. "Did you prepare that speech?" "Actually, yes. Because there's more." He dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Nina's hands flew to her mouth. "Nina Castellano, you stormed into my life and reminded me that courage isn't about building empires. It's about being vulnerable enough to love. You challenged me, changed me, made me want to be worthy of you." He opened the box, revealing a simple platinum band with a single perfect diamond. "Will you marry me?" Through tears and laughter, Nina pulled him to his feet. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married 6 months later in the community center with 400 guests ranging from Sterling executives to the kids Nina tutored. Rosa walked her daughter down the makeshift aisle. Catherine Thorne, who'd slowly warmed to Nina after seeing her son truly happy for the first time in years, dabbed at her eyes. In his vows, Marcus promised to never stop choosing her. In hers, Nina promised to keep challenging him, and they both promised to build a life that measured success not in profit margins, but in lives changed and love given freely. 5 years later, the Sterling Castellano Foundation had provided scholarships to 500 students from underserved communities. Nina, now Chief Impact Officer at Sterling, gave a keynote speech at a national conference on corporate responsibility. Marcus sat in the audience, watching his wife command the stage with the same fearless passion she'd shown that first day, and felt gratitude wash over him. She'd taught him that real power wasn't about what you controlled, but what you gave away. That love didn't make you weak. It made you brave enough to be human. After her speech, she found him in the crowd. He pulled her close, kissed her temple, Still changing the world, Mrs. Thorne Castellano, he murmured. One boardroom invasion at a time, she smiled. Still learning to be human, Mr. Thorne Castellano? Every day, thanks to you. They walked out together, hand in hand. Two people from different worlds who'd built a new one together, one where love mattered more than legacy, where courage meant choosing vulnerability, and where the view from the top was only beautiful if you brought others up with you. In the end, Nina hadn't just broken the glass ceiling. She'd shattered it completely, proving that the most powerful force in any boardroom, any building, any empire was simply this: a brave heart that refused to compromise on what mattered most.